Festival, you'll be interested in this invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity like this cannot be taken for granted.
This evening, we are going to be beating our hearts out for you all, so I want to see people enjoying themselves. So get up and feel the music, something about it, okay?
This event is a right of cultural democracy.
We have many, many partners, you included. I encourage you to stand alongside with us as we travel this journey year after year.
Welcome to the 2022 Smithsonian Folklife Festival. For over 50 years, the festival has convened people on the National Mall to explore the power of culture and creativity in our lives today. This year, we feature artists and partners from the United Arab Emirates and Earth Optimism, a global conservation movement. The Smithsonian Folklife Festival is produced by the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage in partnership with the National Park Service. The festival strives to maintain an accessible and inclusive environment for visitors of all abilities. If you are in need of accessible seating options or assistive listening devices during this presentation, please see our venue manager, who will be right here in the white hat, volunteer for assistance. This festival is made possible by people like you, and this year additional support was provided by the Timashov Family Foundation. So our festival hours are 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. with special eats taking place beginning at 6:30 p.m. on most evenings. The most up-to-date information on schedules, performers, as well as the bios of all of our people and on stage is available at our website, festival.si.edu. We also have a recycling and composting program going on here, so please place your items that you would like to discard in the proper receptacles. And visit the festival marketplace over by the National Asian Museum near Jefferson and 12th to support artisans from around the world. We'd also like to invite you to visit EO Foodways in the tent, or Foodways in the tent right behind us, featuring Earth Optimism chefs today specifically. And now I'd like to welcome you to Sun Powered Solutions, and we'd like to thank Bloomberg Green for helping make this possible today. Our moderator today is Zahra Hirji. She's a reporter with Bloomberg Green. And on our panel, we have Nancy Bechtol, the director of Smithsonian Facilities, Crystal Hansley, founder and CEO of We Solar, and Andy Wyatt, policy director and counsel Grid Alternatives. We will be taking questions from the audience towards the end of the session, so please hold your questions till then. And take it away, Zahra.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited to be here. So my name is Zahra Hirji, and I'm a reporter with Bloomberg Green. In case you have Bloomberg Green before, I'm excited to be your introduction. Bloomberg Green does the journalism coverage of climate change for Bloomberg News. But the real stars of the show are these amazing all-woman panelists, and we're here to talk about solar panel. I'm going to let them briefly introduce themselves, and if you guys have one, to share an aha moment about how you kind of came about learning that climate change is an urgent crisis. And we're going to start all the way at the end with Alexandra or Andy, and then move our way back.
Thanks so much, Zahra. Again, I'm Andy Wyatt. I'm policy director and counsel with Grid Alternatives, which is a national nonprofit. Among other things, it's the nation's largest nonprofit solar installer, although we do a lot of other activities in our mission of advancing economic and environmental justice through renewable energy. And I've been with them about 4 years, working on building on the policy side. A lot of my colleagues are out there building actual systems and building programs around the country to get solar power to where it's most needed. And I work with policymakers in the region and around the country to help make that actually work. And I don't really have an aha moment on climate change. I've sort of always been one of those love nature, want to protect it sort of people. But I can say that the pandemic has really hammered home how interconnected all of our problems are and how interconnected all of our solutions therefore have to be, really with kind of equity and fairness and justice at the front and not as an afterthought. And so I think that has also helped highlight how solar can be one of those win-win-win solutions, and I'm excited to talk about that today.
Awesome. Crystal.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I am Crystal Hansley, the founder and CEO of We Solar. We Solar is a community solar firm located out of Baltimore, Maryland. We focus on including everyone who wants to have access to solar by policy, and in Maryland and 22 other states, with New Mexico being the latest to pass community solar legislation. And what makes our firm unique is that we make sure that the community is the center and value set of everything that we do, from financing, development, and customer acquisition. We make sure that minority and frontline communities is a part of the just transition to renewables. And I look forward to getting into more of what we do and learning more about my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Nancy.
Hi, everybody. So Nancy Bechtol. I happen to be the director of Smithsonian facilities. So I've had the pleasure of working for the institution for 30 years now. And it's just a fantastic place to be. And it's surrounding us today as well as where we're sitting today. So it's just wonderful to be here. My aha moment probably occurred. I am a born and raised gardener. And I actually went to school in horticulture, was my first degree. And so I have really studied the plant world and watched the plant world as a gardener and just seen the changes in the environment with invasives moving into our natural areas. And so really that's probably my aha moment, watching it from the garden.
Amazing, thank you. Well, what I'm hoping everyone here, and for those who are following at home, take away from today is hearing more about how solar energy and solar power is a climate solution, why it's really important that everyone has access to solar power, and kind of our path forward. But before we can start thinking about the future, it's important to have a little bit of historical context, because solar has really grown exponentially over the past couple of decades. As the amount of solar has gone up around the country, in the world, the price of solar has plummeted. I think I saw one statistic about how the price has dropped about 70 to 80% just in the past decade. And so I was hoping that Andy can tell us a little bit about how we got to this point, why solar has really been able to flourish in this country so far to now.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of history there, but you're right. A lot of it has to do with starting with kind of the early adopters, and then just between policy and technological innovation, getting those prices and costs down so that now solar is, and renewables in general, but especially solar, is not just kind of the cleanest solution, but the most cost effective. And that is what really gives me optimism, because you don't have to, it's not ideological. It's just the simple truth that solar, harvesting energy from the sun, is better in every possible way than mining it from the ground and burning it into the air and causing all of these problems that we hear about. So yeah, historically, I will say a lot of policy support has gone into promoting those cost declines, and I think that highlights that it's been a popular technology, and it will continue to be across the country for all sorts of different reasons.
Thank you. There are a bunch of different types of ways in which we can get solar panel. So there can be really big kind of institutional or big solar farms. Maybe you've seen them on the side of the road if you're going down the highway. There's also solar panels on roofs of buildings and homes and community solar. And I want to jump to Nancy, who can tell us a little bit about how the Smithsonian, just on this mall we were talking about earlier, before we jumped on, there are a bunch of museums on the mall who have solar panel. Can you walk us through them and
Sure.
which one came first?
Oh, God. Oh, which one came first? That's a good question. So we sort of did 3 museums at the same exact time. So there was a way to sort of bundle that solar, and it was through a government contract that made it very affordable for us. And so we were able to put solar on our American History Museum, Natural History Museum, and also our Natural Museum of the Native American Indian. And those 3 sort of happened around the same time. And very similar in timing, we were building our African American history and culture. Now that solar roof went on because we were seeking LEED certification. So that is something that the U.S. Green Building Council it's actually a national certification process for new construction in this case, and we were able to put solar on the African American History and Culture Museum because of that.
So basically, LEED certification is to have like the cleanest building you can have, right?
That cleanest building, and LEED is the leadership in energy and environmental design. So it's kind of like Kleenex, right? we sort of just say LEED and we don't think in terms of what that means. Yeah.
Well, the panels on the African American Museum are literally on the roof, though you might not be able to see it from the ground. And that may be one way that people in the audience have encountered solar the most, is on people's roofs or on buildings' roofs. But not everyone has a roof. I know I rent, so I can't even get rooftop solar. And that's where community solar can come into play. So I'd love if Crystal could kind of explain, because her whole business is built around community solar, of defining that for people and who it's for.
Yes, thank you. So just piggybacking off of what Andy said, sweeping legislation across states really supported community solar. And community solar means that as a developer, we're able to build at an off-site location, and that group of panels or aggregate energy is then produced and circulated back into the grid. And now individual utility homeowners or subscribers, like apartment dwellers or folks who just cannot get solar because it's not south-facing or they can't afford it, can now tap into one of the community solar farms in any of the 22 states nationally. And to me, that's really special and important because solar always skewed higher income, and that was the barrier for a lot of communities. As we transition from fossil fuels, there's communities that just felt left out and would see that, wow, I would like to be a part of climate change, but I just feel so small, and also I can't participate in the traditional ways of just going green and being renewable or even having access to renewable energy. And so community solar in Maryland and across the Northeast and also the West, Colorado being the first state, really opens the market by 80%. And that's a nice percentage for people to now be able to participate in a transition and also save the planet and decarbonize their footprint, but also receive some of the economic resilience at a time, especially now when we're experiencing really high runaway inflation, and making sure that the most vulnerable neighborhoods and census tracts in our community actually can have that economic resilience when outside of the community solar model, they weren't able to participate in solar or other renewable solutions.
So I want to take this opportunity to highlight that you are the first Black woman owned business for community solar in the nation. And you also launched on Juneteenth or June 19th, 2020. So we just hit the 2-year anniversary. How many people or communities, you'd pick the best metric, are currently getting solar through your programs?
So currently we have over 100 megawatts of community solar subscriptions. And we have 2 verticals in my business model. My aha moment, going back to your first question, I was with another community solar firm right when the Maryland community solar pilot took off. It passed in 2015, but the first farm wasn't really developed and turned on until 2018. And a lot of developers, believe it or not, or just in the industry, or you can believe it, 95% of solar executives are white. So what happens when you are piloting a new model, a new industry, and the incentives and the solutions are really meant for everyone, but really a niche focus on low-income communities and minority communities? There's a huge, what I've coined the term, cultural competency lag. And so what was happening in the community solar sector, which was meant well, right? We had a lot of like developers from out of states and out of countries coming in and taking advantage of the policies, but their folks wasn't signing up for community solar. And so how do you connect the dots from real solutions is that you have to have minorities and women a part of that. And so because there weren't any other firms that I saw can really bridge that cultural gap of, hey, there's a lot of communities that can benefit and save from community solar, but the folks that are signing up are still the ones that traditionally have rooftop solar. That was a problem. That was my aha moment. And so We Solar, and just my vision and having agency over my marketing ideas and terms, that's what we do. We wanted to bridge the cultural competency in the community solar market to make sure that, yes, let's continue the momentum of what was started in the traditional rooftop solar, but also make sure that those vulnerable communities are taking part and understand what's happening now.
Thank you. So this next question is for Andy. And Grid Alternatives also works in community solar, and a huge part, or most of the mission, is expanding access. So I was hoping you could provide a little bit more context for the other tools that exist in the toolbox for getting solar to, say, people of color, low-income communities, disadvantaged communities.
Thanks. Yeah, we do work in community solar. I'll leave it to Crystal to handle those questions. We also develop programs around like low-income solar or solar access for other different communities, as well as workforce development and job training, and other different aspects of getting renewable energy to everyone and making sure that those barriers become not barriers. And so I think again, I'm a policy person. I think a lot comes down to policy and recognizing what the barriers are and then being really intentional about addressing them. One of the, for rooftop solar, there are a lot of low and moderate income homeowners who don't face that rental barrier to putting things on their roofs, but they are living paycheck to paycheck. They can't have a big investment no matter how much it's going to pay off, in a few years when they're getting all that free energy and they've paid off their system or something like a market rate household. And so there are programs around the country, including here in the district, that help overcome that barrier, that upfront cost barrier. In the district, we have the Solar for All program that Grid Alternatives works with the Department of Energy and Environment. And we also work with the Department of Employment Services on that program for something called SolarWorks DC, where we're not only installing solar on income qualified households, but we're getting community members out there, training them on rooftops, and providing all sorts of other different services so that they can really get their foot in the door for this really great career path, because solar and renewable energy are really taking off, especially with electrification and so many other things. So yeah, that money is one barrier. Just people not thinking that it's for them when they're seeing where it's been before, that's a barrier. And so the best marketing that we have is always, someone's neighbor down the street gets solar on their roof, on their row home or what have you, and is very excited about it. So we get lots of referrals, and people can really see, yeah, this is for all wards and all neighborhoods. Financing and other barriers, sometimes it gets more technical, and we work with policymakers on the basis of our on-the-ground experience in communities and taking the perspective of the communities, because, again, where they lead, they are full of solutions, and we just have to listen to communities and what they want.
I think, yeah, those are some really interesting points, and I know that I've heard this in my reporting and kind of following the industry, that when people start doing it within a community, start using solar, that it kind of proliferates from there. So for Nancy, you mentioned already some examples on the mall. I'm curious what else the Smithsonian is kind of considering in terms of using solar, if there are projects already underway or in the pipeline, and I guess the lessons learned from the initial projects.
Okay, so I'm going to go off script for 5 seconds.
Okay.
And I'm going to come back to that question, I promise. But I just want to sort of engage the audience just for a second, because I will say it's easy to sit there and think, oh, woe is me, right? And we don't have everything perfect in any of our businesses, and we can't do everything, right? And I put a little bit of solar up on a museum roof, and it's this much of the energy, right? It's just nicking away at
fractional.
It, right?
Yes.
But I guess my take is everyone in this audience, whether they rent, whether they own, right? What can we do, right, to celebrate this sunshine? I mean, we are celebrating right now this week, summer solstice. We've got the longest days of sunlight this week. So what can we do to celebrate that? And I think I mentioned earlier, I'm the gardener, so I celebrate that sun with plants. How many people in this audience make sun tea? You have to make iced tea for the summertime. How many people put that jug out and take advantage of that sun, right, to make sun tea? That's a way you can sort of, it's just a little example, right? But it's a way that you can sort of celebrate the success that we have, I think, and the unbelievable joy that can come, right, from the sun. So back to your question, where else can the Smithsonian build that solar complex? And we've added some slides to the slide program, but we have 2 science centers. One's in Edgewater, Maryland, and the other one is in Front Royal, Maryland. The Front Royal is associated with our National Zoo, and in Edgewater, Maryland, it's an environmental science center. And in both of those locations, we're trying to use the land that we have to produce the solar and basically building out solar fields. Again, nicking away at trying to get as close to net zero energy as possible so that that facility can actually run from the energy that it's generating from the sun, but also from other ways too. And I like to think of the world in the sense of that cup half full, right, instead of half empty, and just keep nicking away at it. And every square foot, every house, every home, every field, that we're able to generate, it helps, makes a difference.
Thank you. I know that all of you guys do some work in this region, and many of the people who are watching at home or who are actually here may be from this region, though we get visitors to the Folklife Festival from all around the world. But since the policy and the support that's local really makes a huge difference, maybe we can start with Crystal and then kind of go back to Andy and then end with Nancy of what does the landscape look like in maybe Maryland or DC or wherever you're kind of most focused on, and what's changed, I guess, in the last couple of years to kind of help proliferate solar here?
Yeah, so the DOE just announced a few months ago that community solar will grow by 700% in the next 3 years with the goal of 5 gigawatts. With the current projections, we have taken a dip because of supply chain, and right now solar development is actually like a 20-25% premium. And so that's definitely set us back a little bit, and we're still looking to see what happens with the bill before the recess, if we can get a senator from West Virginia and Arizona and deal with the ITC credits and the incentives that will really bring us back to our original goal, which will also directly impact the community solar space. And I'm sure Andy could talk more about the policy landscape. But essentially, I just took a trip to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a very spiritual one to be just to see the history of other Black entrepreneurs and come up with creative solutions in parts of the states that don't really have the energy policy numbers, energy democracy numbers on their side, and just bringing all of the community, including the utilities and gas companies, to the table. And believe it or not, a way forward is still having those conversations. And I was really surprised with just the talks off the table, and really ready to work with the Native community there, and also some of the minority community to get solar when they even confessed about a year ago those discussions would have never happened. So to me, it's just like creating the pathway forward, even when we don't have policies in some of the conservative states, or the utilities may just not really have a robust solar goal. I would say to revisit those conversations, because at the end of the day, the people want solar, and they're willing to work with you, and just beyond the national rhetoric, just still try to build on the community, even in those tough census tracts.
Thank you. Indeed.
Thanks for highlighting the national policy. It definitely has a huge impact regionally, and I encourage anyone who lives in a state to contact your senators and tell them that, we want ambitious climate policy. Those of us who are residents of DC, I don't know, we can shout in that general direction, I guess. But a lot of energy policy does happen at the state level, and this is an increasingly strong region for solar policy. Grid alternatives started out in California, which you kind of expect to be out there in front of a lot of clean energy policy. In a lot of ways it is. But the District of Columbia has pretty ambitious clean energy goals for where we get our energy sources from, and equity goals for who is getting the most economic benefit from that energy. Virginia, just a couple of years ago, passed the Virginia Clean Economy Act and some shared solar enabling legislation, so that will be hopefully coming soon to a Commonwealth near us. Maryland, again, has been a leader on community solar and some other policies. And so for anyone in the region, I'd encourage you to do your research on what is available to you this year and in the near future, on the basis of these policies that people have fought for and that are laying the groundwork for really transitioning as quickly as we can to a clean, renewable energy future.
What about you, Nancy?
So I was just saying, because I totally agree with everything Andy has said and everything Crystal has said, and so where we're sort of postured at the Smithsonian is sort of stay in the planning stage, try to get everything set up, and then when the climate does improve, be ready to pounce. is really what we're trying to do right now, and just taking advantage of as things do kind of ebb and flow over time, but hoping for a better policy time.
No pun intended.
Yeah. And kind of explain a little bit of how we got to this policy moment. There's both been some holdup in Congress, of course, but then, of course, when it comes to solar, everything with energy and our whole world is all tied up. It's interconnected, right? So the COVID pandemic has really slowed a lot of things down. That has, of course, impacted inflation. And then there's been the Russian war on Ukraine, and all of those things have impacted the supply chain. So even for the projects that have been confirmed or have support, some of those have experienced some barriers, to say the least. But I did want to take this opportunity to maybe ask everyone, again, kind of going down the line, since this is the theme of the day is Earth optimism, as I'm looking at the sign over there. What you've touched upon it a little bit, but I guess most directly, what all of you are most optimistic about in terms of the growth of solar, over the next, say, decade. And maybe we can start with Andy and move our way down.
Sure, thanks. I am genuinely optimistic. I think the trend lines for solar and renewable energy continue to be strongly on the up and up. And part of that is that increasing awareness, I think, of the interconnectedness of the problems and the solutions. Actually, in solar, interconnection is kind of a technical term. It's like what happens when you connect your system into the overall grid, and it's permitted and all that. But it's also just interconnection, the health needs of people whose energy security, is threatened by increasing storms from climate change, the economic factors, everything just kind of points to the reality that all of these things have to be addressed in a holistic way. And I think we're just kind of getting more of a culturally attuned to that reality and that need to do hard things, do multiple things, solve multiple problems at once. That's kind of the only way that we'll get ahead, but I think that we can. And we can seize these win-win-win opportunities presented by solar for good jobs, clean air, better health, electrification. It ties in with, transportation electrification and electric vehicles, cleaner stoves. I'm sure the news is out there now that methane gas stoves are terrible for us all. And just the reality that when you solve things on this holistic way, it's not just avoiding climate change and mitigating disaster. It actually makes the world better. Like it actually, there are things to look forward to, this cleaner vision, this cleaner world, and it is feasible. And there are a lot of people working on it, and the momentum is there.
Yeah, I would say optimistically is to have awareness of where we are, and the intersectionality of climate change and environmental justice, partnering with larger buying power institutions can really help solve some of the issues that we're facing, because the reality is it's not so optimistic. But in order to really improve and have that positive outlook, we have to really communicate to those that what's at stake. And looking at the UN climate report was really scary, because the reality is the planet is getting hotter, we're getting poorer, inflation, and recently women have less freedom. And so understanding how climate change and even starting companies that are women-owned and led, and really focusing those economics and communities, that's how we can optimistically look to the future where the sector is more diverse. That's what I'm optimistically looking for, where more communities have understanding and the common language around solar is understood. People know what community solar is. It's no longer a mystery. They're not skeptical about it. Everyone is signing up. Everyone is working with workforce development programs and education programs like GRID, and the market it's really inclusive, and who owns the equity part is also inclusive. So that's my optimistic, but first we also have to realize where we are and face that and have that consciousness. That's the only way that we can have a positive future.
Thank you.
Wow. I just want to listen to Crystal all day. So true, everything everyone is saying. I just, we have one Earth, and it is our Earth, and I feel like we have to reduce our carbon footprint. And so I'm speaking today for the Smithsonian, trying to reduce its carbon footprint, but we as individuals living on Earth have to reduce our carbon footprint. And I think taking advantage of this amazing sun and doing everything it can to generate as much energy as possible to help us diversify how we're producing that energy is an absolute must for every single one of us. So whether we rent, whether we own, we have to figure out a way to do it individually, and then all of us who work have to figure out a way to bring it into our business. And we're running out of time. Yeah, so I do think everyone on this stage feels a real sense of urgency, and it cannot just be for one of us. It has to be for everyone that lives on this earth. So Crystal's absolutely right. There's nobody that can be left behind.
Does the Smithsonian have a specific solar goal? So to have a certain amount of watts up and running or powering their facility by 2030 or by 2050. And I'm using those dates for the audience because those are the dates that you'll often hear if you start reading some of these very scary or dire reports about the future and the path that we're on with climate change.
So Smithsonian follows the federal mandates, the federal goals in this regard. So all of our environmental policy really falls behind the government's environmental policy through their executive orders. And those ambitions are very, are reaches, I would say. It's difficult to do in a museum setting where we really have 24/7 collections care. We're not buildings where I can just turn the lights off or turn the power off and we only work 9 to 5. So it makes it very difficult. So that's why the challenge is huge. But instead of wallowing in that challenge and saying, oh, there's nothing I can do, we say, what can we do? And we're just doing everything that we can.
I would really encourage everyone. Nancy spoke to Congress, I think it was last year, about some of the climate challenges that the museums were facing, and she gives a lot of examples in terms of sea level rise and intense rains and what it can mean for certain buildings on the mall that we're on now. I do want to take this opportunity to ask Crystal, since it has been 2 years since you launched, if you are hearing from other women, other Black women, other women of color who kind of want to follow in your lead in solar, in community solar, or if those conversations haven't quite happened yet.
Yeah, I receive calls and emails from students ranging from 5th graders all the way to PhD, as well as fellow energy colleagues across the renewable energy space. I was recently appointed to the American Renewable ACOR Board of Directors, and one of the second Black women and youngest on that board, having that board seat, and also building off the momentum from George Floyd, and a lot of incentives were passed, and startups and incubators, accelerator programs. And I've been able to network with other minorities and WMBEs in that space because there was a call to action in all industries, because there was a problem and lack of diversity, especially in the energy space, but then also in the renewable energy space specifically. And because that, I would say that momentum was created, we realized that there was just so many more people that looked like me, and everyone was working in their individual silos. And so optimistically, just going back to the previous question, is still reaching out and working with some of those connections that I've been able to build in the last 2 years, and also bringing what I've learned in those incubators and accelerated programs, just making sure that as an alumni now, I graduate, that I spread the word and say, hey, when folks reach out, sign up to this program, join this group, be a part of the LinkedIn and Facebook connections, and speak and be the representation. It's difficult, it's challenging, but like Nancy said, we just roll up the sleeves. The community knows the problems, like what Andy said, and we also have the solutions.
Thank you. I think it is time, if anyone in the audience would like to ask our panelists questions, please come forward. If so, please come up to the mic. Please say your name and your question.
Name Dave Onsbach. I'm just wondering if you heard about I've heard about new technology coming out of National Renewable Energy Lab that converts 40% of heat energy to electricity through solid state panel. Have you heard about that?
Have I personally heard about it?
Yes.
I don't know if I've heard about it. Have any of our panelists heard about it?
I can't say specifically, but I can say that the National Renewable Energy Laboratories and other public and private institutions continue to really do amazing work on technological innovation. And just to build on that, you hear a lot about innovation kind of versus deployment, but we absolutely have to be deploying solar energy as fast as we can, even while we're innovating as fast as we can, because fast is necessary.
I think we have someone who's coming forward with another question.
Two, if I'm able.
We'll start with one.
So I know that you're with what you were talking about, I was wondering, is there anything that you're looking at in terms of solar water heating and incorporating that into what you're doing for any of you? I know you're actually more a generation person, but I was wondering about that.
Yes. There's like the solar water heaters where you run the water through a system kind of on your roof, and Grid Alternatives hasn't gotten into that particular technology yet, although we do follow kind of heat pump water heaters and the whole trend towards combining solar and renewable energy with electrification. So combining multiple technologies at once is definitely another great way to get, again, that win-win-win and to really solidify those gains. But there's a tremendous number of connections between water issues and renewable energy. But Grid has not, we don't install that particular technology, so I don't have more to say about it than that.
I would just add we have some of that technology, but where we do not have electricity. So we have several science stations, especially in the country of Panama, and there's no utility at all other than our solar generated. And certainly to be able to take showers, wash clothes. So we have those systems where electricity is not available.
Thank you. Please ask your second question, and can you say your name too?
Oh, my name is Michael Nephew. This actually, I guess, is more toward you, because I haven't heard anything lately in anything I've been reading about passive solar, and you might have a better idea of that, or maybe.
Well, seems like something I should be writing about more.
Exactly.
Thank you. I don't have that much to say, but I will. I am pretty new to the climate solutions beat, but I'm always looking for areas to look at, and we'll certainly be looking into that. Do any of our panelists have anything to add about passive solar specifically? Okay.
There's lots of really exciting fights about building codes probably happening in a town near you. Again, it's policies made by people who pay attention, and there's a lot to pay attention to, but...
And I think while there has been a lot of political gridlock at the federal level, there has been a lot of progress, and a lot of kind of the change that's happening is happening at the local level.
Definitely.
Yes, please come forward, your name and your question, and if there's anyone specifically that you are directing it to.
Okay, Natasha Finnerty. I'm with Smithsonian up in Massachusetts, and we have buildings that we don't own, or have another university that we're working with. And the energy bills are just coming to light, but the solutions seem to be a little bit out of our control. So what tools can we use? This came up actually on Wednesday in our meeting. What tools do we have to actually set out 3-month goals, 6-month goals, 1-year goals, 3 years? Like, how are we gonna get there? Like, how can we get help through some kind of tool or app that we can say, this is what we need to work on next? We did install LED lighting, we've insulated, we've put a chiller in, we're doing those kind of low-hanging fruit, but what at the Smithsonian can we get assistance with?
Okay, and hi, Natasha. It's good to see you, and not on a Zoom call, but in person. So, what can we do? And Natasha and I have talked a lot about this, and it's very difficult when at the Smithsonian we own a lot of property, but then at the Smithsonian we actually lease a lot of property too that we don't own. And often it is our administrative space, but sometimes it's our collection storage, and sometimes it's our scientific lab space. And that becomes a networking, trying to influence, right, the actual owners of the buildings. It's funny, I was over in our Capitol Gallery, which is an administrative building, just 2 seconds ago, and all of the chilled air, so it's very hot inside the building because it's an office building. And I was walking out of the building thinking, gosh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could just literally turn off that chilled air like we can in an office building. But it's that kind of thing, Natasha. It's trying to get to influence, the people that actually own the property. Yeah.
I will add that there is a lot of low-hanging fruit that often has to do with energy efficiency and what you can do, but of course there's a ceiling to that, and then maybe that's where it comes into what other technologies can you bring in. It seemed like Crystal had something to add.
Yeah, I will also say that you can also look into community solar. We have worked with large institutions that cannot physically put panels on their roofs because they might have a lease, and that's the perfect, virtual net metering is perfect, where you can actually use your aggregate buying power to anchor a community solar. So in some states, like in Maryland and also Massachusetts have community solar, you can literally buy your energy, I don't know if you buy it in bulk, But if you do pay a direct energy bill, you can also look into community solar.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to bottle up this whole conversation and take it with me, but guess what? I can't because it is being recorded. What I'm hearing, particularly what Nancy said about, sort of the layering of all this, and also what Crystal's saying, I feel like how are we going to capture the connectivity between these efforts? You all represent different efforts, big institutional efforts. We're talking policy. You're on the ground trying to get people to sign up and be part of this, and get entrepreneurs to move in this direction. But how are we going to connect this? Where is the common space where the conversations are happening other than conferences?
Yeah. That's actually a really good question, Ruth. And other than conferences and really why we're celebrating Earth Optimism, that was all about bringing those communities together and having that conversation and trying to learn from each other. And I don't know, where else, like just meeting Crystal today, trust me, I know her now. I've made that contact, and the same with Andy, but I'm not quite sure. So maybe you guys have some better ideas. I wish there was more communication.
Yeah, I mean, breaking down silos is always perennially a goal. But I'll just put in a plug that, talking about climate and energy issues is and can be everyone's job. Everyone can have a climate job, like literally no matter where you are. You can, if you work in a building, you can probably have some influence or ask the right questions about what your building's energy use is like. Or if you work from home, you can be out in your community talking about the different things that you can do at home or in the community with community solar, show up again to those local meetings and all of those sorts of things. It's, how do you break down those barriers and have those conversations? You just have them over and over again, and it's a grind, but it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are issues that you should not be afraid to talk about with anyone, and that's how you can get some really surprising and interesting solutions and discussions. So this is the end of our panel. I'd love everyone to kind of give a round of applause for these amazing women, and thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
And thank you, Zahra, for being a great moderator. Let's give him one more round of applause. Thank you so much, everybody. That was fantastic. And obviously, there's a lot to discuss. And luckily, as Ruth mentioned, this is all being recorded and it's available online at folklife.si.edu. So that's fantastic. So thank you, ladies. While they're leaving the stage, just wanted to remind you of a few other things. We have our festival marketplace, which is on the other side of the Smithsonian Castle, where you can buy goods sustainably made from all around the world. Some amazing stuff over there. Of course, we have our concessions, our earth-friendly concessions on the other side by the main stage. And right directly behind us is the Foodways tent, where today Earth Optimism chefs are going to be featured. And right now there's going to be some oyster shuckers doing some stuff with sustainable oysters. So please join us there. And thank you again for joining us here. Back at 3 o'clock, we'll have another EO session called Livelihoods and Landscapes, so you won't want to miss that. And it sounds like we have some poetry and song coming up from the UAE on this stage next. Thank you.